Hello, 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 and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I am your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I want to thank you all for tuning into another show, another broadcast. I hope you guys had a great day, and I hope your week is off to a good start, and I hope that this year is off to a good start for you guys. Now, today is January 24th, 2023. And we are already almost finished with the month of January for 2023, which is fantastic. We have an opportunity to really speak about issues that matter on this platform. We have an opportunity to speak about the topics, the hot topics, from the perspectives of young men who look like me and who identify with my community. To follow up with last week's show, it was recommended to me that I talk about suicide. And I'm going to talk about suicide, but I'm also going to talk about what it means to really have a healthy mindset, a healthy body, a healthy spirit, as well as healthy relationships. Now, I spoke about the traits of a strong relationship last week when I had a conversation with you guys, I guess just an open forum with you guys. I talked about the traits of a strong relationship, but it was, and again, I talked about earlier this year, I talked about what it meant to really, really heal from our hurts. So I wanted to take an opportunity to really sit back and talk about suicide. And I also wanted to talk about what it means to have suicidal thoughts or what it means to really make sacrificial decisions. I think that sometimes when we're going through life and when times are very tough, I think it's very easy to just throw in the towel. I know a lot of people struggle with suicidal thoughts, and I know that the suicide rate skyrocketed during the pandemic. But I pulled some sources after doing some research about suicide. And even when I was an intern under the house call program from MedStar Good Samaritan Hospital last summer through Civic Works, I was able to recognize the health related disparities that were prevalent in each and every community, especially a lot of the marginalized communities of color. And I really had a chance to really see to the fullest extent what that looked like on those house calls with the patients and their caregivers, with the community social worker, and even reading about that um, and even studying the field of gerontology. I was able to recognize what the suicide rate looked like for older adults. Now, I'm going to speak about what the suicide rate looks like for teens as well, a lot of young people. But I wanted to start off with seniors because, of course, like Mr. Stein mentioned earlier this year, last month I won the Social Change Award from the Honorable former Lieutenant Governor, Miss Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. I received a Social Change Award for my work under the House Call program in the field of geriatrics. And I wanted to start off by speaking about the suicide rates amongst older adults because I think that oftentimes the senior population gets overlooked and undermined. But by me working under the House Call program and really serving in that capacity with Civic Works and also under MedStar Good Samaritan Hospital, big shout out to MedStar Health for providing me with that opportunity. I really had a chance to really identify the disparities between the communities of color and the communities that are marginalized, who are considered to be, in a sense, low income, impoverished, so to speak. So I wanted to share with you all a couple of passages that I pulled regarding this. And I want you guys to just sit back and listen. And I encourage everyone to just think about this because I think that oftentimes, again, we don't think about the older adults that make up the population. We don't think about the seniors who are a part of our communities. But this, according to, I'm just going to speak about the suicide data and statistics in general, and then I'm going to shift gears and talk about the seniors, the teens, and different age brackets and what that really looks like. So according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, in 2020, there were 45,979 people who died by suicide in the United States, which is one death in every 11 minutes. And 12.2 million adults seriously thought about suicide, while 3.2 million adults made a plan. 1.2 million adults attempted suicide, but another other statistics show that for every suicide death, there are 4 hospitalizations for suicide attempts, 8 emergency department visits related to suicide, 27 self-reported suicide attempts, and 275 people who seriously considered suicide. Now, again, these are just general statistics. They differ amongst race, age, and whatnot. But let's just break that down a little bit more when we think about this conversation. So some groups, according to the CDC, have disproportionately high rates of suicide. The racial ethnic groups with the highest suicide rates in 2020, were non-Hispanic, American Indian, and Alaska Natives, and non-Hispanic whites. So in other words, those two ethnic groups, racial groups, 23.9 was the average age adjusted rates per 100,000. For non-Hispanic whites, there were 16.9. For Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiian, non-Hispanic, 12.5. For non-Hispanic multiracial, it was 9.6. For non-Hispanic Black, it was 7.8. For Hispanic, it was 7.5, and non-Hispanic Asian, which is 6.4. Now, the suicide rate, according to the CDC, among males in 2020 was 4 times higher than the rate of females. So, for instance, I'm just using the figures right here as an example. It says that males make up 49% of the population, but nearly 80% of the suicides. And according to the age-adjusted rates per 100,000, there are 22 males on average and 5.5 females. And according to the CDC, people ages 85 and older have higher rates of suicide. And again, that's the age bracket that people are at most risk. So we think about this, we can think about, again, the figures. And I just wanted to just give you guys general figures. I know that the suicide rate skyrocketed throughout the pandemic, especially when it first started. But let's shift gears and speak a little bit about the senior population, because the senior population is the population that is often overlooked. So according to an article by Dr. Marilyn Mendoza, Marilyn A. Mendoza, in an article titled "Why Do the Elderly Commit Suicide?" It was posted on January 28th, 2020, and it was reviewed by Jessica Schrader. It says that when most of us think about someone committing suicide, we don't usually think about the very young or the very old. Yet, we know that children as young as 5 commit suicide and that it happens to the very old as well. Statistics from the National Council on Aging state that those 85 years and older have the highest suicide rate of any age group. It is over 4 times higher than the nation's overall rate of suicide. As with most age groups, the majority of elders who kill themselves are male. As high as those figures are, the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, AAMFT, suggests that the rates for elder suicide are underreported by 40% or more due to what they refer to as silent suicides. These would include overdoses, self-imposed starvation, and dehydration, as well as accidents. The rate of suicide completion in this age group is also high due to the lethality of methods used. There are many factors that may contribute to an elderly individual inciting to suicide. One of the primary factors is loneliness, and we talked about that last week. At this point in life, the person is likely to have experienced a multitude of losses: family, spouse, friends, pets, as well as outliving their own doctors. At some point, there is no one left who knew them from the past. Many of the friends they used to talk to or get together with, if still alive, may have their own problems with transportation, health, vision, hearing, or memory. Giving up a driver's license can have a profound impact on the elderly. They may be more dependent and have to rely on others to take them places they want to go. A lack of transportation, as well as possible problems with physical mobility, also serve to limit the elderly's access to others. All of these factors increase loneliness. Some other adults are fortunate to have family members who they live with or are close by to keep them from being too lonely. While this is beneficial, there is still loneliness of not having people their own age with whom to talk to. And again, I just encourage you guys to just really, really sit back and listen, because these facts are some of the facts that I learned while I was intern. Before I graduated from UMBC with my second degree, I was an intern for the house call program, and I actually had a chance to really sit down with the patients and their caregivers and speak about their lives. I speak about their caregivers and their families and friends and people who were, in their circle with them as they suffered from their chronic illnesses and their underlying health related illnesses. And I just wanted to let you all know that I was able to learn a lot about the aging population when I was an intern last summer. And I was able to learn much more about the field of geriatrics and how we as a community just have to do better with checking on our elderly population. We always remember our babies. We always remember, we even remember the teens sometimes, but sometimes we forget about the people who are aging in place, or people who want to, again, thrive independently. It says that depression and other mental and physical health issues can also be significant determining factors in an elder's decision to commit suicide. Indeed, some researchers believe depression is a more serious risk factor than loneliness in the elderly, given that most of those who commit suicide are either living with family or are in frequent contact with family and friends. For many elderly, the lack of purpose in their lives becomes a contributing factor to their depression. For some who have always been self sufficient, relying on others can lead to feelings of powerlessness, helplessness, or hopelessness. Sometimes the elderly may display signs of depression, such as not eating or drinking, isolating themselves, crying, expressing feelings of being worthless. However, many who do commit suicide do not have a diagnosis of depression. In fact, data from the Administration of Aging report that 58% of older adults who commit suicide see a primary care physician within their last month of life. Declining physical health in the aged is another factor contributing to suicide. As well as we all know, our bodies change with age. We no longer may have the agility or strength we once had. In addition to normal aging issues with vision and hearing, there are disorders that result in chronic pain and intense physical discomfort. The more debilitating the illness, the more reliant on others they become for care. For those who have spent their life being the strong one, taking care of others, it can become demoralizing to become reliant on others. It seems that when people become elderly, they become invisible. Others do not notice them or engage with them. It is as though they become a throwaway generation. Of course, it does not have to be that way. Prevention of suicide in the elderly requires a multifaceted approach. Certainly, having more human contact to decrease loneliness is of utmost importance. Visiting in person, talking on the phone, and taking them places out of the house, even if it's just for a ride, are helpful ways to counter loneliness. Today, newer devices such as elderly-friendly iPads are available, in which they can video chat with others. For those who always had pets as companions but are not able to now, there are robotic dogs and cats. They have software and emulate sounds and movements of a pet with no worries about feeding or house training. Medical and mental health personnel should routinely screen the elderly for suicidal ideation, provide family members with warning signs, and make referrals as appropriate. It concludes by saying that aging is not easy. A famous quote says, "Getting old ain't for sissies." Many who read this will likely live to become one of the very old. Think about how you would like to be treated and provide that for the elderly in your life now. So, again, let's just take a pause for a moment and just think about all of the things that I've read to you guys. When we think about the elderly population, and when we think about people who are aging in place, and when we think about that model itself, we can definitely think about, again, those relationships that we have as we continue to age. We can also think about the condition of our homes, the condition of our bodies, the condition of our minds, and the conditions of our spirit. I think that when we talk about mind, body, and spirit, I think that when we speak about the elderly population, first and foremost, and when we think about the condition of the heart, the mind, and the body, as well as the relationships, I think that they all go hand in hand with one another. excuse me, excuse me. I think that they all go hand in hand because I think that when you have healthy relationships with others, I think that you tend to be much more happier. And even I even had a chance to research this while I was serving under the house call program and speaking with patients and their caregivers. From the social worker standpoint, I was able to understand how my supervisor was able to really speak with the patients about the quality of their relationships and about the quality of their homes, their safety, their concerns. And she was really able to really sit down with them and speak about how important the resources were and how important it was for them to have a helping hand as much as possible as they continue to thrive and as they continue to age in place. And again, oftentimes when we think about the elderly, we have to remember that again, many of them age in place. Many of them do have a desire to be independent, but we also have to remember that the relationships matter. When you have healthy relationships as you age, you tend to be healthier and happier. You tend to have a healthier spirit and a healthier mind. I think that again, those relationships are important. And just like I've read to you guys, those relationships tell us from the seniors' point of view that they matter. They want to feel important. They want to feel acknowledged. They want to feel represented. They want to feel like their family members and friends and the people around them care about them and love them unconditionally. So these are just some of the things I just want you guys to remember. Another article was written by Kate Rope and reviewed by Michael W. Smith on March 22nd, 2021, that says that each year suicide prevention specialist Julie Rickard looks at the recent research on suicide rates and decides where her organization will put its time and money. And again, this is an article from a different source that I'm reading to you guys. It says that Julie Rickards, who runs the National Center for Suicide Survivors, has focused on two key groups of people. And again, this is where we shift our conversation within the next 10 minutes. The two groups of people, the key groups of people are teens and seniors, citizens. Now, it says that you probably have heard about the increasing rates of suicide among adolescents and teens, but you probably haven't heard that rates are going up in older adults too. And this is the population that already loses a lot of people to suicide. And according to Dr. Jerry Reed, Senior Vice President for Practice Leadership at the Education Development Center, which is an organization that runs suicide prevention programs nationwide, says that older adults are about 12% of the population, but make up about 18% of the suicides. It says that one reason the numbers are so high is that older adults, especially men, have a much higher death rate than other groups. 1 in 4 seniors who attempt to kill themselves will die compared to 1 in 200 youths. That's because, according to Dr. Reed, it says that that's because they often have access to some of the most lethal means. Some of the examples they provided are firearms and medication. And 51% of all completed suicides are with a firearm, according to Dr. Reed. With older adults, that number rises to about 70%, according to Dr. Reed. And he also goes on to say that when they make a tragic decision, they tend to follow through with it, and yet we hear so little about it. And the next subtitle says, Why the Seniors Attempt Suicide. It says that it's really important for people to understand. Dr. Marilyn Mendoza, the clinical instructor I told you all about, who works at Tulane University Medical School, who writes about mental health for Psychology Today, says that it's really important for people to understand that people who kill themselves are trying to get rid of their emotional and physical pain that they are experiencing. If they could push a button and end that pain, they wouldn't kill themselves, but they are hopeless, and that's what leads to suicide. But they feel hopeless, and that's what leads to suicide. In fact, Dr. Reed believes that more than 90% of people who attempt suicide have untreated or undertreated depression. And it says that for seniors, things that can contribute to that depression, and again, we talked about some of these factors, and some of these, telltale signs are having lost multiple loved ones, being homebound and isolated, feeling like a burden to others, chronic pain, the loss of senses like vision and hearing, and food insecurity and financial troubles. So these are some of the things that contribute to that depression for seniors, and these are some of the things that I discussed before. So Dr. Mendoza says that when you get that old, there are not a lot of people around that you knew. You've outlived most of them, and all that changes. All those changes are very distressing, and you don't hear as well, you don't see as well. Your arthritis bothers you, and all these things build up, and it becomes very hard. Julie Rickard says that the pandemic has given the rest of us a little glimpse of what it feels like. People are isolated at home and away from their communities and worrying about their health and safety. And again, this article was written and published early on in the pandemic. So again, we're 2 to 3 years behind this, but this is still relevant to what takes place now. It says that we are now seeing rates of depression of 50% in the general population because all of a sudden we've pulled out their main coping strategies, she says. And well, that's what it's like for every senior. And culturally in America, we just assume, of course, according to Julie Rickard, it says that culturally in America, we just assume, of course, older adults are depressed, and of course, they don't have things to do, and that's normal. And that perspective leaks into healthcare, which is the industry that I work in as well. It says that the average age of doctors is half the age of seniors who are coming in for care, and seniors are stereotyped with the idea that it's normal to have pain, to feel alone, and to experience multiple deaths. And Dr. Reed goes on to say that depression is not a normal component of aging, and it is just as treatable in an 80-year-old as it is in an 18-year-old. And he and others emphasize that we need to have much better screening for seniors in doctors' offices, emergency rooms, and programs that serve older adults. He also goes on to say that 58% of older adults who die by suicide have seen their primary care practitioner in the last month of their life. And I mentioned that before in the other source that I used, but again, this is from a medical professional standpoint. And they're more likely to have talked to their doctor about a physical complaint rather than a mental health concern. And that there's an opportunity there to inquire about their mental health. And we as a community should. And again, this is according to Dr. Reed. He says that there are screening instruments that will quickly tell you whether someone is struggling with a mental health concern. And if they are, there are plenty of interventions, pharmaceuticals, therapeutic support groups, and making a care contact with an adult can be the difference between life and death. And again, some of the symptoms of depression or suicide risk in seniors are as follows. It says that the loss of interest in their hobbies or the things that they used to do, feeling teary, or they may cry for no apparent reason. They have big changes in their sleep. They may isolate themselves. They may say that they feel worthless or hopeless, and they may stop eating or drinking. And they even talk about giving their belongings away or saying things such as, "When I'm not here." Julie Rickard acknowledges that it can sometimes be confusing when seniors talk about what will happen after they die, since they are close to it than most folks. But you have to ask, are you thinking about suicide? And Dr. Mendoza goes on to say that there is an old belief that if you ask somebody if they are thinking of killing themselves or hurting themselves, that will make them do it. And that's not true. And if anything, it's a relief for them that they can share it. After a traumatic event, according to Dr. Mendoza, like losing a spouse, seniors are more vulnerable to attempting suicide. And there are the times that family members or others need to start paying attention. So to sum up everything in the last few minutes that I talk about suicide amongst seniors, I'm going to shift gears and talk about teens. But before I shift gears and do that, I'm going to speak about what we can do in order to combat the suicide rates that take place amongst the senior population. So it says that if you think that your loved one is in immediate danger, the first thing you do is call 911, take them to an emergency room, or even call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. And don't leave them alone, and make sure that they don't have access to medications, guns, or other means. And more ways that you can assist with this is to talk to your loved one about how they're feeling and to share your concerns with their doctor and make sure that they are screened and treated adequately. And they also advise everyone to reach out to community mental health organizations to find local counseling, support, and opportunities for their loved ones to connect with others. organizing family members to check in on them, making sure that, again, they don't have access to firearms, speaking with their doctors and their pharmacists about how lethal their medications are and what can be done to help keep them secure, and giving them things to look forward to and reasons to get up in the morning. So, for instance, the examples that they give are a bird feeder that needs to be filled, or a plant that needs to be watered, or even a regular conversation with a family member or friend. They also recommend helping them listening, well, encouraging them to listen to music every day and taking a break from the news, which can trigger their anxiousness, their anxious thoughts. And the number one thing to recognize is that depression and suicidal thoughts are not normal when you're older, according to Julie Rickard. And it's very treatable. And the best thing you can do is advocate for your loved one, because if someone's depressed, they can't advocate for themselves. And again, a couple of other organizations that are listed here that can assist the seniors and people with disabilities and people who are suffering from depression, loneliness, isolation, and so forth. It says that the Institute on Aging runs a friendship hotline, which is 1-800-971-0016, which creates exclusively created exclusively for seniors and people who are part of the disability community. The crisis text line will connect everyone to a crisis counselor 24/7, so 24 hours, 7 days a week. You are free to text home to 741-741. AARP is also an online tool that helps isolated seniors connect with others. And Meals on Wheels, I think that people are familiar with some of these, but I just wanted to again share them. Meals on Wheels delivers food and company to older adults. So when we shift gears, and as we end this conversation about the suicide rates amongst seniors, and as we prepare to talk about teen suicide rates, I just want you all to remember the seniors who are part of your lives, the seniors that you encounter every day, the seniors who are part of your family, the seniors you may be friendly with or you may be friends with. I encourage everyone. I think that it's important for everyone to do their due diligence, and then check in on the people that they love and that they care about. Oftentimes, when we're busy with our lives and when we're just so accustomed to just getting up and going and just doing what we usually do, sometimes we forget about, reaching back and really making time to really spend that time, that quality time with the people that we love. Sometimes we become so busy, we forget to do that. Sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing that we sometimes forget about checking in on people. And we sometimes forget about how important it is to make sure that our loved ones are okay. Just because they don't say anything doesn't mean that they're not suffering in silence. A lot of people have suffered in silence throughout the course of the pandemic. A lot of people have been in the position where they've had suicidal ideation because just like some of what was stated, they do feel lonely, they do feel burdened. Some people do feel anxious. Some people are at their wits' end. But again, ultimately, what I took from the passages that I read and from what I've studied, not just as an intern under the house call program and in other capacities, what I've gathered from suicide based upon what I've read, and also because of what I've done in the healthcare industry with my work, is that oftentimes suicidal thoughts take place when people just want to stop hurting, emotionally, physically, mentally, and even spiritually. So most of the time, that person does not want to die. They just want to stop hurting. And that could be physical hurt, emotional hurt, mental hurt, you name it. Spiritually, it's in many facets. So when we think about our seniors, we have to remember to check in on them. We have to remember that their needs matter. We have to listen to them. In order to work with the senior population, we need to be understanding. We need to be supportive. We need to, again, be encouraging. We need to be that helping hand, someone that they can count on, someone that they can call and speak to whenever they have a problem. Again, developing that healthy relationship so that you can have a healthy mind, body, and spirit. All of that matters. So I hope that as we shift gears and talk about teen suicide rates, I hope that you guys can really listen to that we take that for what it is and just make an effort to do more if you feel like you haven't done your best. But as we take a break and as we shift to talking about teen suicide rates, I want you all to just really think about the young people in your lives. It could be your children, it could be your grandchildren, your nieces, nephews, godchildren, cousins, aunts, uncles. I mean, anybody, your colleagues, anyone. When we talk about teen suicide rates, we can often think about what teens go through every day. There was an article from UCLA Health that talks about suicide rates amongst teens and young adults. And it was written by Sandy Cohen on March 15th last year. And she says that the suicide is the second leading cause of death among people ages 15 to 24 in the United States. And nearly 20% of high school students report serious thoughts of suicide, and 9% have made an attempt to take their life, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Recent weeks have brought heartbreaking examples of this trend, including the March 1st death of course, this was in the news, Stanford soccer captain Katie Mayer, who was 22 years old at the time, and Ohio State football player Harry Miller's revelations that he attempted suicide, shared his struggles with his coach, and got help. Miller announced his medical retirement from football on March 10th, in a Twitter post that had been shared more than 10,000 times. And Harry Miller goes on to say that this is not an issue reserved for the far and away, but it is in our homes, it is in our conversations, and it's in the people we love. And Dr. Carl Flesher says that young people are particularly vulnerable to suicide. And again, Dr. Carl Flesher, he specializes in adolescent and child psychiatry at UCLA Health. And he says that the things that make them vulnerable are where they stand socially and where they stand developmentally. Teenagers and young adults, according to Dr. Fleischer, sorry. Teenagers and young adults have the highest rates of suicide compared to other ages. It says that the things that make them vulnerable are where they stand, again, socially, and where they stand, again, developmentally. Developmentally, their judgment and decision-making abilities are still coming online, he says. The prefrontal cortex, and again, these are psychology terms, the brain's executive control center doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. It says that makes young people who are more impulsive, Dr. Fleischer says, and that they're not going to weigh risk and consequences or values in quite the same way that older folks will. He also goes on to say that socially, teens and young adults don't have the same connections older adults do. Someone who is married, has a long-term partner, or has children or grandchildren. Someone in that predicament is in a different place socially than someone who's just coming into their own, living with roommates, or who may feel alone. And the isolation of the pandemic exacerbated social disconnection even more. And when we identify people at risk, we can often think about the fact that Harry Miller, which is the young man I spoke about, says that a person like me, who supposedly had the entire world in front of him, can be fully prepared to give up the world entirely. And he acknowledged that he probably looked fine as a player on TV and academically with a 4.0 in his engineering studies. But Dr. Fleischer says that not all people who are considering suicide appear outwardly upset or depressed. And individuals who are self-reliant and consider that among their strengths may have difficulty asking for help. Now, for some of those folks, according to Dr. Fleischer, relying on other people and reaching out for help has been so difficult or seems so shameful that they can't just bring themselves to do it. He says so they take on more and more, and they think that maybe they need to take on more and more to look strong for other people or to be strong for other people. And everyone has that breaking point at some point. He also goes on to say that not all suicides are attributable to depression either. While depression is a risk factor for suicide amongst teens ages 15 to 24, he says that only about half of the people who take their lives had depression. People who have vulnerable self-esteem, which is defined as self-feelings that require ongoing protection and promotion, are also at higher risk for suicide. Again, This is Dr. Carl Fleischer from UCLA Health. And this article was written by Sandy Cohen last year in March on the 15th. So these are some of the these are some of the this is some of the input that was provided in this passage for all of the readers. And in terms of how to help, Dr. Fleischer says that it's important that as a culture and as individuals, we make it clear that when people are suffering, we want to know about it. And he also goes on to say that we can all suffer and we all need to reach out for help. He encourages adults to proactively check in with the young people in their lives to let them know that they are available to listen, and not because they look like they're struggling, but because they look like they're okay. And teachers and parents needn't fear. Again, this is quoting Dr. Carl Fleischer. He says that teachers and parents needn't fear that talking about depression or suicide could somehow encourage self-harming behavior. So again, he's encouraging teachers and parents to not think of that. And what doesn't seem to increase risk of suicide, according to Dr. Fleischer, it says that the risk of suicide is talking about the importance of mental health and talking about the importance of reaching out to people who are struggling, or if you're struggling, reaching out for help. And talking about suicide in general and talking about depression is not going to make things worse. And again, he goes on to say that, and again, he's a psychiatrist, a child and adolescent psychiatrist at UCLA Health. So he has credentials that are legit and that are reliable. So I just wanted to just piggyback on a lot of the things that was shared amongst teen suicide rates and what that really looks like. I know a lot of people who have who have high schoolers, middle schoolers, college students, and young people who are still trying to find their place in this world and who are still trying to figure out what they want to do, what they want to be, how they want to look, how they want to present themselves in the world. I think that the world is changing so much, and I think that there are a lot of things that young people are exposed to nowadays that make them susceptible to danger and to things that could harm them and not help them. So I think that oftentimes when a lot of caregivers and parents and guardians, a lot of caregivers, parents, and guardians leave a lot of teens and young adults to their own devices, that can oftentimes backfire because people aren't really aware sometimes of what their children are doing. A lot of people are really detached from their kids. A lot of people are really detached from their families, and they just assume everything's okay because no one says anything, and they don't create that open dialogue with their children and with the young people that they're in constant communication with. They don't keep that dialogue open to talk about mental illness and to talk about what they're going through. I know that for me, I can speak for myself. My mom and I have always been very open about our struggles and our personal struggles and what we're going through. And she always leaves the door open for me to talk about anything that's on my mind or that I may have trouble with. She always encourages me to come to her if I have a problem, and she always creates that open dialogue with me. So I'm always in the position to go to her if I have a problem. But sometimes I've had conversations with people, a lot of young people, some young adults, and even some parents. And I find it very troublesome because some people are very, very detached. Some people are not in constant communication with their kids at all. Some guardians, parents, and caregivers don't leave that door open. They don't leave that space for them to really speak about what they're going through. And they sometimes don't even inquire about it. They just expect them to just know what to do and how to go about it and have a solution and have a resolution. And that's not always the case. It's not always black and white. So I think that what I gathered from this article and from some of the other passages that I read while I was preparing this show is that, creating that open dialogue matters. Creating that safe space for kids matters. There should never be a point where children are afraid to go to their parents to speak about their mental health challenges or to speak about many of the issues that they're having trouble with. I know that for me, again, when I speak to a lot of young people and when I speak to people in my network and a lot of people on a personal note, it really just amazes me that a lot of people are really detached from their kids. A lot of people are really detached from their parents, and they don't have that open space and that open dialogue where they can just be vulnerable and that they can just be honest and not feel judged in the process. So when we think about suicide amongst teens, and when we think about the sacrifices that we need to make so that we can, again, create that open dialogue amongst our community, the young people in our community, with the older people, the elders in our community, when we create that open dialogue, we can create that safe space so people won't feel like they have to, I guess, build a wall all the time. Because oftentimes when people build walls around them, people have a tendency to tell themselves that their needs are not important, and that they don't matter because no one inquires about them, no one checks in on them on a daily basis, no one asks how they're doing, and they think that no one cares. And even though that may not always be the case, that needs to be communicated more. So when we think about suicide rates amongst teens, we have to think about all of the things that teens are exposed to nowadays. There's so much peer pressure. There's so much temptation out there to do the wrong thing. But again, there can be positive peer pressure and there can be positive influences out there that can, again, motivate them to do better and to be better and to become healthier and happier individuals so that they can grow and prosper and be all of what God called them to be. So these are some of the things that, again, I spoke about, you know, I've spoken about on my show, but again, I wanted to revisit this because we're in a new year. It's 2023. The pandemic has come to an end. The virus may still be here, and it may be here from now and from moving forward. But but the pandemic has pretty much come to an end, and we're looking at the aftermath of the pandemic. While the pandemic took place, a lot of things were exposed. A lot of people were exposed. A lot of situations that were kept under the radar have been exposed. So I think that it's safe to say that when we talk about mental illness and when we talk about suicide and when we speak about pain, we have to remember that all of our pain matters. We need to be in a position where, again, we can call someone up if we have a problem. Our pride, we cannot let our pride get the best of us when we're going through hard times. I cannot even tell you all how many viewings I've been to already this past year. I've been to several viewings already, and this is January. This is the first month of the year, and I've already been to several viewings, and it's really tough because because the people in my network and the people who I have a close personal rapport and relationship with, I always tell them that if they need something, I'm here. It's my job to be supportive. It's your job to be supportive to your family and to your friends. It's not always about you. It's not always about your needs. It's about also when we're creating a healthy mind, body, spirit, and relationship, we also have to be concerned about the needs of others. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are lacking nowadays because of the way the world's going and because of the direction everyone's heading. I think that we have to remember that we have to, in order to build healthy relationships, we have to care about the needs of others. We have to be, again, that listening ear, that shoulder to cry on, that safe space. We have to create that safe space for people in our lives so that they can feel honest, so that they feel like they can be honest, and so that they feel like they can be vulnerable, and so that they can feel like that, again, they have someone to confide in whenever they have a problem. My heart goes out to people who feel lonely. My heart goes out to people who may feel like they're in this world by themselves. They're by themselves. My heart goes out to people who suffer in silence. While I was in college, before I graduated from college, before I graduated from CCBC and UMBC, I was definitely able to learn how to just be more upfront and open about my needs and about my struggles. I was the type of person who suffered in silence as a teenager, and even before I finished CCBC and UMBC, I was the type of person that thought that he could handle everything. But I learned, through counseling and through my therapy sessions, through my psychotherapy sessions, that I don't have to do it by myself. And again, having conversations with my family and close friends, they reassure me all the time that they're there for me and that they are going to uplift me, when I'm doing well and when I'm feeling horrible. We have to be there all the time for people, regardless of how they may be feeling. And I've spoken about this before. It's really important for us to create a community of people, to have a community of people to go to if we have a problem. We're not meant to, God did not design us to be alone for eternity on earth. To live our lives alone on earth. He did not design us. He did not create us for that. He created us to have healthy relationships and to have a healthy mindset and to have a healthy spirit and a healthy body, because he says in the Bible that our bodies are temple. And he speaks about healthy relationships in the Bible and how important they are. He speaks about how important it is to have a healthy spirit so that everything else in our lives can thrive. I think that it's very important for us to just remember that. And I say all the time, and I've said it on my show before, that it's very important for us to just find a community of people who are going to uplift us and who are going to hold us accountable if we're going in the opposite direction, or if we're doing something that is not right or may be unethical, I should say. We need to have people who in our communities who can hold us accountable for things and who can step in when they see us going in the wrong direction, and who can be our voice of reason when we're having a problem or when we're suffering. And again, I say it all the time. People in your life should be bringing things to your table, and not just eating things off of your table. And what I mean by that is that it's important to find people in your life who can add value to what you are doing. And I think that when you have a healthier self-image and when you feel good about who you are and what you're doing, that is more likely than not going to attract a better caliber of people. And again, people should not come with their hands out all the time, expecting you to, and they should not expect you to be there for them all the time, and not do the same in return. It's your responsibility to be there for them, just like you want them to be there for you. When something important happens in your life, and you want them to be a part of your success, you should be open and willing to be a part of their success. You should be celebrating their accomplishments and their achievements and what they do as well. So these are some of the things that I encourage everyone to think about, because life is very short, and it may sound trite, but it's true. Life is very short. So I encourage you all to just really again, take a step back and really think about it, because people have been going through a lot. People have really been suffering behind the scenes. People don't understand what it feels like unless they've been through it to really be depressed. And depression is not just sadness. There's a difference between sadness and depression. It's normal for everybody to feel sad. There are people who walked into the new year sad because of an unfortunate circumstance that may have happened. But again, when we think about depression, when it gets to the point where we can't function, when it gets to the point where we feel like we don't want to get out of bed in the morning, when it gets to the point where we feel like we can't talk to people about what we're going through, when it gets to the point where we don't even feel like eating or drinking every day, when we feel like we're in a position where we're just isolating ourselves from people more than usual, that becomes problematic. That's definitely a red flag that should go up for people around them, whoever that person is who may be going through that. So these are some of the things to just think about and to consider when we talk about suicide amongst seniors, and when we talk about suicide rates amongst teens and young adults. Those are very prominent groups, powerful groups, diverse groups who experience a lot. And again, those relationships are important. Those friendships are important. Having a healthy mindset is important so that you can understand where you are and where you're trying to go and how you can set those goals in the process. When you're strong and empowered physically, and when you have a healthy body, it transcends into your emotional health and into your psychological well-being. And when you're ready to really dig deep and look inside, you can feel good about yourself mentally and physically. So I encourage everyone to think about that too. When we have a healthy spirit, when I think about a healthy spirit, I also think about our relationship with our Lord Jesus Christ and the condition of our hearts. With that, I think that the condition of our heart about our relationship with God matters too. Because I think that when your relationships are not where they're supposed to be, and when you're not operating in a healthy mindset, and if you are not healthy physically, I think that that causes your relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ to be tainted in some way or another. So again, I encourage everyone to just really think about all of the things that I've shared on the broadcast this evening, because people are going through a lot. There are people who are suffering in silence and who don't even realize it. And looks are deceiving. Just because things may look good on the outside doesn't mean that things look good on the inside. A lot of people are concerned about how things look versus how things really feel, because sometimes people can't handle their responsibilities. Sometimes people have a hard time navigating through life with their relationships, with their finances, with their families, with their friends. I mean, so just because they may look like they have everything, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're happy or that they're content with the way things are. So I just want people to be mindful of that, because oftentimes people associate things with the things that look good with things that feel good, and that's not the case. Everything that looks good does not feel good. So when you're content about your relationships, when you feel good about where you are in your relationships, the quality of your relationships, the quality of your health physically, everything else falls into place. When you have a healthy mind, when you have a healthy relationship with God, everything else falls into place. You can't have a cluttered mindset and expect to just have a clear path towards getting where you want to be. You cannot have an unhealthy body and expect to have healthy results. I think that, again, when we think about where we are in 2023, and when we think about the status of our relationships, our mind, our body, our spirits, and our souls, we have to examine every component of our life, every element of our life. When you're strong and empowered physically, it transcends into your emotional health and psychological well-being, just like I reiterated. When you have healthy relationships with others, you more likely than not are going to feel better about who you are. When you have a healthy dose of self-esteem, and when your self-image is much more positive, then you more likely than not are going to attract a better caliber of people who can add value to your life and who can bring things to your table and not subtract from your life and take things off of your table. So before I go, I just wanted to just thank you guys for tuning in to another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I knew that this was not going to be an easy conversation, because people have a tendency to shy away from topics such as mental illness and suicide and things of that nature, but this is a necessary conversation. Decades ago, mental illness was not discussed. Decades ago, suicide was swept, the conversation about suicide was swept under the rug, and it was not addressed appropriately. But now, since we have the resources and the tools to really identify the triggers, to identify the warning signs, and to identify the needs, the resources that are required in order to meet the needs of the community, our community, we can be much more successful at conquering depression, conquering suicide ideation. And we can definitely be in a position to uplift others in the process. So again, I thank you all for tuning in to another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I don't take it for granted. I love each and every one of you. I hope that you all have a great evening. Make an appointment to meet me back here for the last show in January, for the month of January, on Tuesday, January 31st, 2023, for another riveting conversation. So I'm going to really, really dig deep and really think about what I'm going to be sharing. I hope you guys really took some time out to really listen to these last few broadcasts and really learn from that. I knew these were not going to be easy shows. I knew this was not going to be an easy conversation. This is not an easy topic by any means. But again, it takes courage to say that you need help. It takes a strong person, a strong man or woman, a strong boy or girl to really uncover their weaknesses and to really be open and transparent about what they're going through. about their struggles. It takes a vulnerable person to really do that. So don't ever feel like your voice doesn't matter and that your needs don't matter. It takes a strong individual to acknowledge their weaknesses and to accept help and to really follow through with that. It takes a strong man or woman to really do that. It takes a strong boy or girl to do that. So again, I encourage everyone to take advantage of the resources that I've presented to you all. I in the beginning of the show, I spoke of a couple of organizations and a couple of numbers that you can contact if you feel like you may suffer from suicidal thoughts, or if you may know of someone who may be suffering from that. You can definitely contact these organizations, and you can again make it your business to reach out to them and let them know how you feel. And again, if you have a friend or a loved one who is suffering from this, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. You can also, again, contact the police at 911 if you feel or if you suspect that you or someone you love is really going through this. Make that call. Don't be fearful. Don't be afraid to do what's right. Don't be afraid to check in on people. Don't be afraid to really, again, make it your business to make sure that people are healthy and happy. People want to feel loved. People want to feel appreciated. People are tired of feeling broken. People are sick of feeling depressed. So everyone wants people in their lives who motivate them to do better. Everyone wants to feel appreciated. Everyone wants to feel loved by someone else. So I love you guys. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. You guys tune in each and every week for a great show. Fantastic broadcast. Make sure that you follow Awesome Guy Radio on all of the social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. You name it, we're on it. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Awesome God Radio. Make sure that you follow my work. I'm at Nelson E. Brown on Twitter and on Facebook and on Twitch and on all of the other social media sites. So make sure that you follow my work on Instagram and Twitter at Nelson E. Brown, and on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitch at Nelson Brown. So this is the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I hope you guys have a fantastic evening. I hope that you guys really took some valuable information from this show and used it to your advantage so that you can move forward in the best possible way. So I love you guys. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you all next week. Take care.